Hello, everyone. I'm Mitchell Scott, Editor-in-Chief at Kootenay Mountain Culture Productions, and this is the Headwaters. Now, you might be thinking, what in tarnation is going on here? A random, out-of-the-blue bonus episode? We've never done a bonus episode before, so what would be the purpose? Well, we've got some special news to share. We are over the moon excited to announce that the Headwaters is returning for a fourth season. The dream continues. Boom goes the dynamite, or something like that. Thanks to our partner, Columbia Basin Trust, we will be back this summer with the launch of 10 more captivating podcast episodes featuring a plethora of delectable stories from the Columbia River Basin. We're talking about epic mountain adventures and epic feats of volunteerism. What is a rodent actually? And people who live on their boats. Those two are obviously not related. From preserving our heritage buildings to safeguarding our nighttime skies, with a few side trips to those little towns in the basin we drive by but rarely visit. It's going to be another beauty season. Okay, enough with the superlatives. We can't wait to have you along with us for the ride in this special episode. What's the other big news? Columbia Basin Trust is celebrating 30 years of supporting the region. For 3 decades, the Trust has been working alongside communities to strengthen the Columbia Basin, helping to shape the places we live, protect the landscapes we cherish, and support the people who make this region so remarkable. From investing in local businesses and funding recreation projects to supporting arts, culture, and conservation, the Trust has been part of so many incredible stories, many of which we've had the pleasure of sharing on this podcast. This milestone is an opportunity to reflect on the past and look ahead to what's next. And just like the Trust, the Headwaters is all about exploring what makes the basin so unique. Its people, its history, its challenges, and its triumphs. Okay, so we couldn't call this a bonus episode without providing you, our most revered listener, with something to sink your earbuds into. So before we get ahead of ourselves and embark on the adventure of a fourth season, I would like to recall an old saying. It's hard to know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. So with that pearl of wisdom in mind, I've got 3 of our very special and talented Headwaters production staff in the studio with me right now, and we're going to take a look back at the first 30 episodes of our first 3 seasons. What stories did we love and why? Okay, here we go. Pull out your harness and strap on your crampons as we go deep into the fast-growing canon that is the Headwaters Podcast. Maybe we'll inspire you to go back to an episode you loved but might have forgotten about. Or if you're new to the Headwaters universe, let us direct you to some fascinating entry points into our podcast. We've covered a lot of topics. Adaptive athletes to kid geniuses, the damming of the Columbia River back in the 1960s to 3D printing homes for the future, all of which has been happening here in our most fascinating corner of the world. So to help me on my quest, I've got the core of our production team with me here in the studio. Tara Cunningham, our lead producer and story editor, Graham Tracy, our all things sound guy, Vince Hemsall, our master of communications, and me, your director and host, Mitchell Scott. Okay, so Tara, let's start with you. As one of the longtime editors of Kootenay Mountain Culture magazine, you've seen your fair share of stories from this region. What are some of your favorites from the Headwaters Podcast?
Hi, Mitch. Yes, I've read a lot of stories over the years, and I have to say I'm always intrigued by people doing things that are maybe more off the radar than your average person. So some of my favorite stories from the Headwaters Podcast embody that.
Well, there's no shortage of incredible characters here in the Kootenays that are off the radar, so to speak. Let's hear some of your highlights.
Yeah, I found that to be a tough one because there are so many characters around here. But I'm going to start with Norm Pratt, who lives around Christina Lake now. He was one of the main subjects in our episode titled Paranormal, which was episode 11 from our second season.
This is the fellow who could communicate with spirits, correct?
Oh, yeah. He uses his intuitive skills as a psychic to help people and organizations like police forces solve missing persons cases. He has personally found 3 bodies in British Columbia and has helped solve another 35 cases around the world.
And he's found them by, communicating with the spirits after they've deceased, correct?
Yes, he has. And he was the person who found Kimberly Sargent, who was a 23-year-old woman who went missing while hiking in Nelson back in 2004. And that got a lot of media attention. Police said that without Norm, the case would have remained unsolved. So what struck me about this story is that Norm believes that we all have these abilities.
I think it's as natural as breathing. Everybody's intuitive. And, we might not call it an ability, but it's a sense. It's definitely a sixth sense. But most people don't really pay attention to it, don't rely on it, or maybe discount it really easily.
Well, that would be quite the skill to have, communicating with those who've moved on to another dimension.
Yeah, it would be an incredible thing to be able to do. And there's another story that I was also riveted by. From our second season, episode 13, it was titled Tall Tales. There's a man named Earl Pfeiffer who lived in Crawford Bay. And he and his wife owned 2 pet cheetahs. One was named Robin and the other Annie. And one of the cheetahs escaped from their property on a winter day 10 years ago. Then a local saw the cheetah in the snow. She had no idea where it had come from, so she took photos, and not surprisingly, things accelerated quite quickly. That photo of a cheetah that she took in the Canadian winter attracted international media attention.
And this was one of the more popular stories in one of our more popular episodes. The cheetah, the fastest animal on land, they say, living in the Kootenays.
It's kind of crazy, and I guess you could say that it's one of the fastest animals on land since the cheetah returned home an hour later. But the damage had been done by then. The cheetahs were taken away from Earl, and he spent most of his life savings trying to change the laws in both BC and Canada about keeping exotic pets. He lost that fight, and it cost him his marriage and his overall health. He loved those animals dearly, though, and his commitment to his cause just really stayed with me.
I did something I felt was important. I did something that was a risk. If it sounds sad, I think sad is not doing anything. When you're in your last days and you're lying in bed and you look back, you want to say you did everything you could in your life? I don't have any regrets.
Well, too bad he didn't win the case. I often thought an alligator would be cool to have in the backyard. Okay, so we're building up here. Those are 2 really good character stories. What's your absolute favorite today?
Well, I have to say this one is a little more emotional. I loved our story about Fernie Snell Smith. My daughter is a young musician, and so this story about Nell and her improbable rise to musical fame I found just remarkable. Here's this young girl from the East Kootenay who has been going to Flaming Lips concerts with her dad since she was a small child. And at one concert, she's dressed in a parrot suit, and the lead singer, whose name is Wayne Coyne, recognizes her from other concerts. And then to make a long story short, she becomes great friends with him and also makes a critically acclaimed album with the band when she's just 14 years old. Here's a clip from our first season. It's episode 8 titled Young Dreamers, and you'll hear her father and then you'll hear Nell.
Nell just latched on to the Flaming Lips. Nell was 10, I think, and there was a show in Spokane. And so we got tickets to the show, and it's quite funny, actually. Nell burst into tears when we told her that we had tickets to go and see him. It was really cute.
I think that Wayne is definitely, he's like a mentor to me. And I think, I've hung out with his son and his wife, and I've got to know, the rest of the band members. And I think that I would call Wayne, a mentor, a friend, a role model.
But tragically, just last fall, at the age of 17, Nell passed away in a single-vehicle car accident just before the release of her solo album. It's now been released posthumously, and it's titled Anxious. Her parents have set up the Nell Smith Memorial Fund in her memory to provide grants to promising young artists who have financial barriers. I thought it would be nice to hear a clip from her album's first single, titled Billions of People.
I'll keep searching, hoping to find someone like you. And if I was alone, everywhere I've ever been, I'd look for you. And if I was feeling blue and upset, I'd call out for you.
Yes, that is certainly a heart-wrenching story. And, I think we can take solace that Nell burned brightly while she was here. Hold your babies close, as they say. Thank you, Tara. Those are some amazingly dedicated people who call the Kootenays home. Now we'll switch gears to Vince Hemsall. Again, as another longtime editor at KMC, Vince has seen and worked on a lot of stories from our region over the years. And as our resident gnarly climber mountain dude, Vince, what stories stick out to you as some of your favorites?
Thanks, Mitch. My kids will be stoked you called me gnarly. And speaking of gnarly, one of my favorite episodes is about an invasive species called the American bullfrog. It's the largest frog on the continent. It's coming over the border, and it eats anything it can fit into its gigantic mouth.
Sounds horrifyingly familiar.
It's threatening biodiversity in the basin, and it carries a nasty fungus. Of particular concern is it's killing the native northern leopard frog. The species is so gnarly, the government has hired a team to kill them when they cross the border.
Right. That one blew me away, too, from our very first episode, Saving Species. How do they kill the little buggers again?
So this government team heads out at night in a canoe, armed with nets and flashlights, to capture these giant amphibians along the border south of Creston and Salmo.
And they freeze the little guys, don't they?
Yeah, freeze them to death. Here's a clip of one of the technicians capturing an American bullfrog with his hands because it was too shallow for the net.
Yeah, tell you. Nice. I thought you just got a bunch of weeds down here.
Yeah, I'm kind of just holding him above the hips here to make sure he doesn't get away. And I'm thinking this one's a male. It's got a large kind of eardrum there, the tympanum, and then
That's what that is.
there's a little yellow on the bottom, which means he's getting ready for mating. They color up when they start getting ready to mate.
Okay, that's a good one. And I guess they're winning the battle on the American bullfrog. Hopefully that success continues. All right, what's next on the list of offbeat stories about things you didn't previously know about?
This one's really cool. There's a Cold War bunker in the basement of the federal building next to Nelson's Art Gallery and Museum. Apparently, there were 50 or so built around the country in the 1950s and 60s, and they were intended to keep government officials safe in the event of a nuclear attack. They're nicknamed Diefenbunkers, after Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, and you can take a tour of the one in Nelson right now.
This one was wild, and I've been in it, and man, retro dystopian funky, if you ask me.
Totally. You can see the food and supplies and gas masks all sitting there intact. And not surprisingly, these bunkers were kept very secret for a long time. Only those in the know would have known, if you know what I'm talking about.
Right, like we would not have been on the list to occupy one of those bunkers.
No, I don't think you and I would have qualified. But here's a little snippet. This is from last season, Season 3, Episode 26, titled Unexpected Underground. It's the former executive director of the Gallery Museum, Astrid Heyerdahl, talking about the importance of the space.
When you step into this space, a 1960s Cold War bunker, you're transported back in time, not with nostalgia, but with an understanding of how can we look at this bunker space and improve our lives moving forward.
Okay, those are some good ones. But we're all dying to know, what's your absolute fave?
Well, as a guy who likes to climb mountains, I had no idea that if I really wanted to, and I went through the proper channels, I could actually name a mountain. Not after myself, obviously, although that'd be pretty cool.
Mount Hempsall would sound nice.
Dude, wouldn't it? I found out from our reporter, Jamie Moy, that the name has to be relevant to the community and in the guidelines has to be in good taste. But knowing how many unnamed peaks there are out there in the basin, it's got me thinking I could do it. Jamie scoped out an unnamed peak via airplane and then planned a hike up that peak with the intent to name it. This is from Season 3, Episode 21, titled To the Trailblazers.
We hiked about another 3 kilometers up the ridgeline to get to the top. Our total elevation gain was 700 meters. It was stunningly beautiful on the upper reaches of the ridgeline. There were deep blue alpine lakes off both sides and really jagged, craggy rocks. Mitch, you know that feeling you get sometimes when you're out in the wilderness and you start wondering if anyone else has ever seen what you're seeing, and it all just starts to feel so special and rare and unique? That's how it was. But it didn't last. There was a surprise for us waiting at the summit.
We're here. Oh no, there's a cairn up here.
There's a cairn. I wonder if there's a secret peak name in here.
So somebody's been up here. Ugh.
But she realized it doesn't matter if people have been there before, so she presented her idea to Salmo City Council for their input, and it's in the works.
Thanks for that, Vince. Now on to our sound engineer, put it all together studio guy, Graham Tracy. We're actually in his spacious studio right now in Nelson's uphill area. Graham, what stories have got you all fired up?
Well, my picks are a little all over the map, and for lack of a better word, I like the off-the-beaten-track stories. That and anything to do with baseball, because that's my sport.
Interesting. And I'm not surprised about being off the beaten track. Well, I'd be hard-pressed to do a podcast on the Kootenays without venturing into the strange and surprising. Give us some of your favorites.
Let's start with the myth of a giant 3,000-pound gold boulder, which apparently had fallen into the depths of Kootenay Lake when it was being loaded into a boat about 130 years ago. And there is a present-day Kootenay inventor who designs and builds submarines and was going to use one of his subs to find said boulder.
Oh, you're not pulling any punches with Off the Beaten Track. Again, from our second season, it's episode 13 called Tall Tales.
Yeah, inventor Hank Pronk from Fairmont Hot Springs makes his own homemade submarines. He has built the deepest rated homemade submarine in the world. This place really knows how to grow them. Here he is testing the sub he would use to find the gold boulder.
Okay, we're coming up to the surface now. The sub is nice and level, 34 feet off the bottom.
You know, if you have a submarine, you really should have a look for it, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to look for the boat that sank when they dropped the gold boulder into it. If we can find that boat, then we've got something to do.
We can disclose that Hank had to postpone that trip, but the first week of this May, which is a couple of weeks away from the date when we are recording this episode, Hank will be in his sub checking out the gold boulder spot.
He's going back down.
Yes, he is. The fascinating news is that they apparently found a boat using sonar in the reported location where the gold boulder would have fallen in.
Ooh, this would be one of the longest-running Kootenay legends solved. Good luck to Hank.
Good luck, Hank.
Good luck, Hank. I like that you're going deep, Graham. Okay, what's next on your list?
Well, speaking of going deep, I find it a little terrifying that we have a century-old 2-meter-long dinosaur fish living in our lakes. I mean, as a guy who grew up in salt water, it's creepy enough to be in these still lakes and ponds, but it's mind-blowing to me that this 350-pound fish called a sturgeon dwells here in Kootenay Lake's depths, and has so for thousands of years. After hearing that story, I haven't been able to swim quite as easily.
Oh, come on, Graham. They're bottom feeders. Anyway, this was a really popular story with our listeners from Season 2, Episode 18, Changing Landscapes. But Big Bertha is down there. A 250-pound, 100-year-old sturgeon.
It's a big, beautiful fish. But still, what is going on in the water out here?
Sturgeon are reflective of the ecosystem health of the Upper Columbia. So, you know, they're really important top predator. They keep the balance of the ecosystem here in the Upper Columbia. So it's critical that we conserve and recover and protect this species to make sure there's a balance with the health of the ecosystems.
Awesome stuff. Moving on from strange, weird, whatever you want to call it. You mentioned earlier you're a baseball fan. Your son's quite a baseball player, isn't he?
He is. And, you know, baseball is the king of sports. I understand hockey's popular around here, as evidenced by the story we did on Dryden Hunt, a young NHL player from the Basin. And then also we did a story on world-class rock climber Tula Shurkat, both from episode 8, called Young Dreamers. I really loved the piece we did last season in Young Dreamers Part 2, episode number 28. We featured Allie Schroeder, who's a baseball legend already at 23 years old. She's a pitcher from Fruitvale with 2 World Cup medals. She's also the first female to play in the Canadian Collegiate Baseball Conference.
I mean, it's huge for me now because I look back and some of my friends in the national team are playing in the league now, and I know other girls are playing in the league, which is huge because it's kind of like, I mean, yeah, there needs to be one person to go first, but after that, people always follow.
Thank you, team. That was a great compilation of highlights from our first 30 episodes. It's got me pretty excited to launch another 10 in Season 4 coming this summer. Stay tuned. So many compelling people, things to learn about, weird tales, going off the beaten track, all perfect for gardening or a road trip with the kids, submarining perhaps, if you're into that sort of thing. Just don't listen when you're playing baseball. That's our bonus special, super unique episode that you weren't expecting. Stay tuned to our channels as we get ready to launch Season 4 later this summer. And again, huge congrats to the Trust on their 30-year anniversary. To find out more about all the great things the Trust is doing for our community, visit ourtrust.org. To delve back into our previous 3 seasons, head on over to headwaterspodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, I'm Mitchell Scott. Thanks for listening.